and they being referred as astronauts. And the kids being left behind, especially the elder kid, will be taking on the parental role, and those will be called the satellite family. So the whole kind of like disconnectedness is coming from that kind of upbringing, and it's not only a small number, it's a generation.
Why knowledge matters. Lee, Matt, thank you so much for being here this morning. It's such a pleasure. You're a really dear friend, and your art and your business that you actually started is very impressive. But I think first and foremost, we got to know you a little bit better and your background, and then we really also understand why you created Out of Space.
Yeah.
Because your background is really, you're originally from Hong Kong. Your parents are still living there. But you came here to Canada, started at McGill, and then went to Oxford University, did a master's in environmental science, came back, did another master's here at McGill in architecture. And really your family background really fuses all this creativity, that you really bring now to the table when it comes to Out of Space. So tell me a little bit why you started Out of Space.
It's really started during the pandemic, and I don't know if you heard of the annual events of Inktober. So like every year in October, Inktober will be giving out a list of prompts, and then all the artists around the world will be doing a daily post on interpretation of the word. So mine is a bit differently because the prompts that I have is not being predetermined. They're actually coming out from conversation that I have online with my followers. So people will be actually giving me a one-word prompt, and then I will respond with the drawings. So part of it is during the pandemic, like being a Canadian Chinese is difficult simply because like living in Quebec, especially like Asian hate is a real thing. And I'm pretty sure lots of people who grow up here have the same sentiments. You grow up Canadian, you speak the language, you're like assimilated to culture, but very much your parental roots affects you a lot. And that's why the whole kind of generation of second generation Chinese will have a kind of disconnected experience. So that's the reason what's Out of Space. Astronauts actually referring to the economic class immigrants back in the 90s, where the parents of the kids, they go back to the places of origin like Hong Kong, Taiwan, and for their own business. So they either may be having a firm or they work in professional settings like lawyers. So they will be flying back and forth between like the places and Canada, and they being referred as astronauts. And the kids being left behind, especially the elder kid, will be taking on the parental role, and those will be called the satellite family. So the whole kind of like disconnectedness is coming from that kind of upbringing, and it's not only a small number, it's a generation of us living like that. So and what's interesting when I'm having all this conversation is that there's different terms among different Asian nations. Like for example, Korean, they will be calling that seagull, for example, they're flying back and forth. Yeah. So astronauts specifically to Chinese.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it also has been very difficult, actually, obviously, for the past few years for Hong Kong, what's going on, with Hong Kong. So that certainly also has been, contributed to your creativity. Can you explain how it might have, in one way or another, contributed to it?
I went back to Hong Kong in 2014 after been living here for a long time. And one of the reasons is because of the movements, the democratic movements in Hong Kong, and the disconnectedness, and also kind of like the helplessness, like knowing all this news from the far but cannot be participating, is something that like make it very, very devastating. So that's one of the reasons I go back, and there was good job opportunities. I went back as well. While kind of progressive into my career and thinking I need to do a master back in McGill, saying goodbye is very hard, and especially it seems like home is on fire and there's nothing you can do about it. And during COVID, and right now at this very time, Hong Kong is at one of the highest peak for the Omicron variant as well. So again, like feeling helpless from afar and having all this quarantine and having my parents being there at a very far distance is just hard. And I'm pretty sure lots of people who are living in Canada, having relatives around who are living at a distance, and the whole idea that like because of COVID and people kind of like being separated, and you just feel out of place. You don't know what to do. Yeah.
And it's also really interesting. I mean, we have Elon Musk, he just bought Twitter, and he's like, I don't know, I think it's the biggest visionary, really,
Yes.
that we have seen in the 21st century, for sure. But I think even like for the 20th century. And so it really also relates perfectly out of space, because we are really literally going, to space, right?
Yeah.
And so how has he influenced, your brand that you are creating, really building, with out of space?
Yeah. For sure, Elon Musk is a visionary, but then like if you're looking at my Instagram posts, I do have a social critique in terms of like the whole space race, the modern space race. And I don't know if you have watched some documentaries, and whenever astronaut being at outer space and they're coming back and they're looking back at Earth, that's where they really find what home is. And very often the issue that I'm looking at, like colonization, environmental issues, war, all these parts is like, are we actually taking all this baggage that we have on Earth to space? So you'll be looking at like, I'm painting some dirt bits that's floating around. Like, are we bringing all this trash with us? And what is the impact, or how far are we going to be actually damaging not just the Earth but the universe? Like how far reach we can be. So those are the more kind of critique that I'm making in my drawings.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think it's important that we draw attention to it. But on the other hand, also, we see with astronauts who come back, then ultimately they then have a deeper appreciation for really what we call home and, our Earth, this beautiful, stunning planet, really. And so it certainly also has some advantages,
Yeah.
So, and if we go like have commercial space flights, let's say, and people can actually experience it, then, well, I think the logical conclusion might be, I guess, like that's also where Elon Musk's thinking is going, that ultimately we will take better care of our planet.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. So talk a little bit more about also your collection that you have. Like you have like hoodies, you have like all kind of different things, but you also do paintings.
Yeah.
They're very original. They're really, and I just actually bought one, the universe, and I love the universe, just the idea. But it's really impressive, your work that you're doing. And also that you actually are able to bring it out there in Montreal. I mean, tourist offices and those stuff, they take your stuff on to actually sell it to the tourists here in Montreal.
Yeah. So my full-time job is being an intern architect. So what I day to day is it is a creative pursuit, but then there's only such limitations. So the Instagram kind of become my creative outlets, and very often I can finally put some of my architectural training, like drawing, into practice, and that's something that I enjoy and something that I really like doing. And things come out of it. A big shout out to one of my followers. Is a Moroccan girl who was 16 years old, and she was reaching out to me, like asking for some contact for an astronaut and stuff. I was like, I don't know any astronaut, so I was like, why don't you go talk to NASA have an Instagram page, and then the NASA women as well. And at the end, I was just encouraging her, like, go out, reach out there, like if you want to learn more about it. What ended up happening is she actually held a youth conference for the Moroccan youth, and she get connected with actual people working in the industry of aerospace, and a women group as well. And like now I'm part of this story. I was like part of the conference on the Zoom call.
Yeah,
and like if everyone's critiquing on social media, I think this is one of the few occasions that social media is being done right. The whole youth empowerment and the unlikely kind of connection you can make overseas.
Yeah. I think this is so important, and really also this intergenerational exchange that we have. It's not youth against the older or something. No, we are all together. We learn from one another. I think that's the approach. That we really should contribute somehow, to bringing people together rather just to polarize them further. And obviously here it's a really nice example how it actually can help bring people in a positive sense together. Yeah. So your paintings, how do you get the inspiration, and how do you really decide on some subjects? You have like from poutine, which is a very traditional Quebecois dish, to universe and very, very deep things like so where does this all kind of fit in?
I mean, all my inspiration, I just need to thanks to my audience, because I don't actually come up with the idea. It's mostly the word that they gave me, and I usually do interpretations. So very often, like for example, people give me a word balance. Like I don't go straight forward into drawing like a scale or something for balance. I'm just like, what is balance, and what does it mean for be balancing like in space? Like there's no such thing as gravity, so you don't actually need to balancing. So I actually do a twist of the word, will be like something off balance, maybe someone's falling, things like that. Another word of example would be, people can give me some euphoria, for example. What does it mean to have a euphoric experience in space? So at the end, the piece that I draw is actually a piece of cloud floating on a very desert planet, because I think in outer space is what is rare is water, and what is euphoric is actually finding water, and sometimes it doesn't come in the form of liquid, it's coming in the form of gas as a cloud. So that's euphoric for me. So those are kind of inspiration I'm looking at in terms of why do I interpret certain words. So sometimes actually followers will talk to me, it's like, Matt, like this is the word I gave, why did you draw that? And I was like, well, this is my interpretations, right? Yeah. And what I find really valuable is something we rely so much on the virtual. I'm bringing something a bit more tangible, like it's actually on a physical piece of paper. I don't draw on iPad or anything. I draw it on a piece of paper, and sometimes I do the time-lapse videos, and people can see when the water is being spread and the ink is going different directions. That is something like metaphysical about it that makes it so important, because the less that we connect with our physical world, it's a rare quality because people don't draw as much. And I mean, like, in no means I'm offending any NTFers over there, but then like arts and pieces, like they are physical pieces, have its values.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it becomes really I think people are drawn to it. It's like almost like books also to some extent, people they want to have something physical that they can actually hold in their hands. And I think it also operates like in neurologically, it's also a difference when we actually read something and touch something, or if you just actually look at it on the screen. Does your background in architecture and your art that you're doing somehow interrelate? I think they're very they're inseparable, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's less about the knowledge in architecture that I have, it's mostly about the training in architecture that I had, especially in McGill. One of our classes I share with my friends is we have a watercoloring class.
Yeah, nice.
And we actually went, like in my undergrad, we went to New Hampshire. And then like recently in master, we went to St. John's. So we actually went to like places mostly with water, and we will wake up as a group, and then we'll did a week of watercoloring. And big shout outs to most of my prof who is following me. But they taught me a lot in terms of like being physically present in a place and appreciating your environment. And that kind of training kind of help you to, not only are you more aware of your surrounding, it's also appreciating small details. And there's a different thing that you take a snap pictures very quickly than sitting there for 2 hours and kind of try to understand what is the structure and what is the color of this like shade of cloud, and you put it down into your own journal, right? So it's almost a very contemplative kind of experience, and for that it's kind of bring it into design. So you like in terms of people having thoughtful design, not necessarily I have a very gimmick kind of idea and you're just gonna apply and use it. What is important is that's kind of go into my sustainable urban developments degree is understand your environments and design accordingly, rather than having like a imposing a vision on places that's very out of place, like that is
Really
not
nice.
actually like really relating to your environments, which is kind of very disappointing most of the times, because you're I was speaking into gentrification. I'm speaking into displacing people who are the original indigenous community living around the area, and we are not very aware of it, at least not in the past 20 years. Especially there's a whole kind of architectural boom, and people using the tool as a power tool rather than addressing the neighbors.
I mean, also it's important to actually mention that you are award-winning architect too. You
I'm
win
not
a
an
project.
award-winning architect.
Yeah, but you did a very substantial work within a new indigenous community.
Oh yes. So I, in my master degree, so
Yeah,
it's actually
exactly.
academic projects.
Yeah.
Work on a project on. So I'm speaking into the water crisis in Canada. So most the substantial amounts of indigenous community where they do not have daily drinking water. It has been going on for a long time, and the Canadian governments, the way they address the problem is give them weekly bottled water, and I don't think that's okay, and it's only a very temporal kind of situation. And so I, with my architectural thesis, actually look at one specific indigenous community, which is speaking to the Algonquin people in Teginisibi-Ashinabek, which is very close to Maniwaki, which is a very interesting kind of setting, because Maniwaki itself is a very French neighborhood, and for which they have direct access to Hydro-Quebec, while just kind of like right next door is the reserve, and people relying on well waters and surface water. But then the bedrock is actually containing uranium, so most of the water is actually radioactive. So they actually have no way to actually drink clean water. The only way they need is to be buying water from their neighbors, and for which is not ideal. And very often, like people who are living on the land, relying on the resources, do not have the means or have a full-time engineer to operate on a water plant. So like, how do we do this? So like I was looking into a different method that you can actually store water on surface, so you don't touch the bedrock. And one of the example I was looking at is in Ladakh, India. So it's a neighborhood very close to the Himalayan. So they have the opportunity to collect glacier water. So they will have this ice stupa. It's almost like a very tall kind of tube, and then sprinkle on the top, and they collect all this water in the winter time, and they can use it like in intervals during springtime when it slowly melts. And interestingly, Quebec have a very similar kind of climate, and we do have access to a lot of water from different reservoir. So like I was proposing maybe like a domestic scale of an ice stupa for the community I'm working with. And the second solution I was looking at is also a stormwater park. Because Maniwaki and Teginisibi-Ashinabek also have a flooding problem in the wintertime. So they're struggling with excess and deficient in water. So the stormwater park, when it's in the flooding season, that it will actually you have all this like pond that I set up that will collect water, and then by gravity, by filtration, they will have clean water for use. So like the way that interesting, and the way I think my professor appreciated the project, it's less about the intervention I'm making. It's about the process. So again, it's less about the end goal. It's about how do I design it. So the way that I really do the design to propose all this is not to impose a vision. So I actually engage into the Algonquin people. I first asked for permission from the chief. So my end thesis, I actually did a documentary of a video documentary of my call with the chief, and also engaging with the neighborhood. Also, what is a problem, and how do we address it? How do we locate a good site for these interventions? And I'm getting feedback from the facility manager, from people from the community. And this is a really good group of people, because they're one of the first First Nation group where they almost everyone living in the community have access to house. Like they get the good government aid, and then they build a well-structured team that they help people to build houses. So I see it as a means that, like, if they can do it on their own, if I give these two intervention to them, if they get enough kind of help, they can actually like do the structure themselves. For which they appreciate when I give them the blueprint and the design, and after the whole engaging process, I think it's leading somewhere. It's not currently under constructions, and for all the disclaimer, I don't think I know it all, and I don't think it is the solutions. I think it's somewhere along the way that's better than a weekly water bottle solution.
Of course. Yeah, let's go back. I mean, this is fascinating. Actually, about this ice cube, I actually heard also in Switzerland, they were actually talking about this issue also in India and how they do it. And it's actually very efficient because it avoids like kind of the flooding, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you just have all the water and it just runs down and you don't really have it, when you actually need it. Yeah. That's so fascinating. Now, just go a little bit back to outer space. Now, what were the biggest challenges that you encountered when you actually built it? Because it's hard. You have to basically run on many levels, right? It's the business side, it's the artistic side. There's so many. So tell us a little bit about the process and really difficulties that you encountered.
I think the real difficulties is it's a bit more manual in terms of like it's more like a technical problem in terms of like, how do I get approval from Facebook, and why did Instagram freeze my accounts halfway and then I can't do any posts. Like when there's certain growth in following, apparently they think you're like a scam and they will block your accounts. So those were the major challenge that I have, and things that I learned along the way. And like, I guess the biggest challenge to this day is how do you market yourself, right? Like how do you not to use conventional marketing, but actually understand the algorithm behind things. And it's amazing. I mean, I am the generation that grew up with computers. But then still, I'm not the generation, was like with social media, understanding how the whole thing works. But then I think at this point, I don't think it's a black box to me anymore. Like I can really leverage different skills and understand the role of different platform for use.
And I mean, your really best argument is really your product that you have, right? I mean, that's really impressive. So I can really highly recommend you go on your website and really purchase, all the kind of articles that you're creating, because it's really original. That's what I like so much. And of course, the marketing side is also very important, because you need to get the stuff out there and people need to know it. But once they know it, I think you have a big argument.
Well, thank you. Because one of the reason I do it, and the reason why I kind of do the one-on-one kind of conversation on Instagram is, it's another critique on the arts market. Like I believe everyone have the rights to commission an artist. I think there's value in that conversation and dialogue that we're having, and every idea is worth their value. So it's a way for me to democratize art in a certain way, that everyone have the rights to commission, and every idea is worth something. And when it's out there, like you're welcome to buy my art, but then if you don't want to, it's going to my collection, and someone else who appreciates the thought will purchase it, right? So and I don't think arts belong to the museums. I believe arts belong to people's home, and arts belongs to the streets. So like people actually have day-to-day encounter with art, rather than one in a lifetime going to a museum to look at a piece of art.
That's so interesting, actually, and that's what I also realized during the pandemic, actually, that it's almost everything. It's about like culture is really about art, and most of the time when you go into restaurants, it's really kind of where you encounter it, and what makes life so interesting, and where we meet people. And so it's really pivotal, like for our societies, that we have this space where we can exchange it. And I think it really put even more emphasis, during the pandemic and its importance, because oftentimes it gets forgotten, right? We think like, well, artists, like whatever, you think about like people who really do, like entrepreneurs or whatever, Elon Musk, obviously, like amazing, but then you forget actually that, no, that's actually just the the top of the iceberg, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have these really all these amazing artists, really, what you're doing.
Thank
and
you.
that's really fascinating.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I am excited about going to space, that's for sure. However, I think a lot of these billionaires, they're painting a very kind of rose-tinted, like romanticized kind of idea of space travel. Like in reality, imagine you're going to Mars. It's kind of camping. Like you need to bring all your essentials and going there. And people watch Martians, all these movies, right? Like there's glamour to it, but then in reality, like it's basically kind of going to the first century survival. So that's actually a big warning for everybody in terms of understanding. You have all this tech on Earth, and you've been developing all these years, and you're given with the tool. How are you using it? And do not buy into ideas. Is well, sure, it's for the rich, but then like a warning for the rich: are you ready for camping? You're not going for a resort. And for the everyday people, like I mean, in history and effort, there's tool. There's people going on missions. There was always sacrifices, and very often the hidden figures in terms of people who are working at the ground and being sacrificed, no one knows.
Yeah, it's so important that we actually realize that. Well, Mav, that has been so fascinating. Really, I can just keep going on. Thank you so much for your time, and
take care.
You too, and enjoy Montreal. And I'm so happy. I'm just back, since yesterday, and it's just so vibrant. And you really show me some of the best places here in town.
Yes.
I have been living here for almost 2 years, but I never actually, saw these amazing places. So you really have insight. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was Mav Lee, the creator of Out of Space. Check out his website, and that's why knowledge matters.